so much, Erin, for joining us today. It's great to have you on. And I guess that the first thing I'd like you to do is maybe take a few minutes, and for the listeners here, tell us a little bit about Colby College, the women's tennis program, and you as the coach, your philosophy, and anything you'd like to share.
Sure. Yeah. Awesome. So new coach at Colby, although I guess relatively new. So I started in November. Little history on the program. It was formerly a program that had one coach who coached the men's and the women's team, which, you do see in the tennis world. But over the summer, they made the commitment to split the program and, did a search for the women's program. Coach Reeves, who formerly coached both, is now with the men. And I came on board. My official start date was November 1st. So been up here. I moved here on November 1st, so made the move from the Boston area to Waterville. Colby, so we compete in the NESCAC. I think it's just, one of the, if not the strongest tennis Division III conference. A lot of great schools, a lot of great academic schools, tennis schools in our conference. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're in Waterville, Maine, about central Maine, sort of an hour-ish north of Portland, about half an hour from Augusta. So we got Bates and Bowdoin are also in the NESCAC, and we're just keep going north, and you'll run into Colby. About 2,200 kids enrollment. Definitely one of the top, liberal arts programs. So obviously the academic piece is huge when we're talking to recruits, because I'd say every girl on the team is at Colby because they could get into Colby on their own. So the academics are really important. But yeah, I came aboard in November and have been really happy with the girls, and they've been all in and working hard, and it's been exciting to be a head coach, my first collegiate head coaching job. So happy to be there, happy to have landed it at Colby for sure.
Yeah, no, well, they're lucky to have you and all of your experience. And you played Division I tennis, is that right, at Fairfield? So
I did back in the day. Now though, I don't know how it got this long ago, but I played for Fairfield University. Got to give a shout out to Jeff Weichner, was my coach. He is now the current Wake Forest coach. So when he was at Fairfield with us, he was, going to be moving on to bigger and better things. This extremely smart coach, and I was very lucky to have been coached by him. He also has been my inspiration for wanting to be a college coach, and I'm sort of endlessly asking him questions and seeking out his opinion. So I had a great experience at Fairfield, and I hope that, looking back on that, that's sort of the experience I want to be able to bring to my teams now that I'm a coach.
Yeah, that's great. So the recruiting process can be overwhelming and even sort of daunting at times, I think, for players and parents. So for those listeners who might just kind of be getting started with this process, I know I always suggest, like, do your homework and research, do your due diligence upfront before you start reaching out to coaches, just to make sure that the schools on your list make sense given like your academic and tennis profile. So I guess first, do you agree with that? And then also, if so, what advice might you give recruits in terms of like how to go about doing that homework and that research to make these accurate lists?
Yeah, I totally agree. To, spend time doing some research before, just emailing. I can always tell, I get an email from a girl who, has done her research and sort of mentioned things about, our program or something that's particular to Colby, versus, you sort of get these mass emails where, like probably 50 coaches, got them. So I think doing your homework is super important. I mean, there's a lot of ways to do that. Certainly on the internet, you've got all the, UTR sites, the tennis recruiting, you've got the social medias, you can check out a lot of teams now on TikTok and Instagram and, Facebook for those who still use it. So I think there's, or the team's website, so there's just a lot of ways, I think, to go about finding information, making a campus visit, coming up, seeing a practice, seeing a team. But certainly the initial homework, is probably done just, Googling different things and looking into the school and the area and all that stuff. So I would definitely say, and start that process early, because there's so much information out there, and your list probably starts big and then gets narrowed down. So so I would definitely agree with doing your homework before you, reach out to some coaches.
Right. And then on your end as the coach, you're doing your homework too. So like, I mean, there's just so many ratings and ranking systems out there now. It's like alphabet soup, you know, UTR, WTN now, and like you mentioned, tennisrecruiting.net, USTA rankings. Like, what are you using nowadays to try to figure out like who's who, what's what with all of this?
Yeah, there's a lot out there. I think I sort of use a little bit of everything. I know that with the world tennis number being new, I was on a webinar with ITA to just learn and
Yeah.
hear how that algorithm works. And so does sound like that will be the big rating system
Mhm.
sort of globally. So I'm curious to see how that pans out. And they have added it now, tennisrecruiting.net. There's a little WTN, so you can now start seeing that. Again, UTR, I guess, is probably where I start, just as terms
Mhm.
of like a ballpark.
Yeah.
But again, UTR, again, just speaking for Division 3, our girls only compete in the fall and, a couple months in the spring. So I've found that it seems like once people get to college, I'm not sure if the UTRs are as accurate as when they are junior players playing a lot of tournaments consistently coming into college. So it's one thing when you're doing your homework, you can go on and look at a team's roster and get a sense of their range, but do a little more digging. Because I know, just looking at some rosters, my own rosters I'm familiar with, when people aren't competing and it drops, it's not always an accurate picture of a team. So, maybe take a look at some of the freshmen, take a look at, where were they when they came in a couple months ago. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of ranking systems out there, and I just use them as it's ballpark. You sort of get a sense of somebody. But obviously there's no match for, seeing somebody play
Yeah.
live and in person. But certainly all those recruiting tools, are out there, and I use them for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I think most coaches do for sure. So, all right. So a player makes their list. They've done their homework. They make their list. Now they're about to reach out to you. What information is most helpful for you in the beginning? Like, what do you want to know from them? Or maybe what do you not need? you know, in terms
Yeah.
of communication.
So definitely I feel like, as coaches, you probably see it all, the types of email you get for me. And I think a lot of coaches would probably agree with this. I like it when it's short and sweet at the beginning. Just,
Mhm.
where are you from? What school do you go to? Maybe your UTR, GPA helps if you've taken SATs, any of those sort of bullet points that can help me get some information. It's really tough when you open up an email that's like 5 paragraphs and I did this when I was 10, and then and it just goes on. It's really hard to like pull out what the pertinent information is. So I like just short and sweet at the beginning, a little paragraph, again, if they add in something, hey, I noticed, there's a major I like, and
Yeah.
or something like that's great too. But I think make it clear, if the coach has to sit and like decipher it and go through and do more
Mhm.
research, like, they may lose interest, or
Yeah.
it's a little bit tougher. So I would definitely say just keep it short and sweet, and provide just those bullet points where a coach can look at it and say, oh yeah, this, hey, tell me more, and then you can
Yeah.
go from there into like sort of the more in-depth
Right. That makes
session.
sense. And so what about phone calls? So is that usually something you initiate? Like you'll ask the recruit to set up a call, or how does that work for you?
Yeah, I mean, I found, now phone calls are probably the thing I do the least. I'd say a lot more is happening on Zoom, or I like
Mhm.
to give the recruit a choice, would you like to grab, get on Zoom or a phone call? I like Zoom because it's just face to face.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say, once I sort of, see some information, we'll write back and, hey, I'd love to know more. Let's get on a call, sort of as
Yeah.
being the next step. Certainly I think also text messages are used a lot, but I'd say,
Mhm.
yeah, it's once I've gotten the information and if it seems like someone who could be a good fit, definitely, a call would be the next step.
Okay. Okay. And then ideally, you'd probably want to see them play in person, like you mentioned, whether that's practice or matches. So how do you determine? Because obviously we have limited funds, you can't recruit everywhere and anywhere, and time too. So how do you determine where you're going and off campus to recruit?
Yeah, I mean, that's, obviously the best thing is to see them. I try to look ahead and set a recruiting calendar. And so when people
Mhm.
ask, oh, you can be at these tournaments, I might have an idea. Definitely, I think for D3, our summers are big, and the off season, November to sort of February is a good time. You'll see coaches sort of in different locations. But yeah, it's just sort of, I try to hit the bigger ones, if I can see more, the bigger showcases or bigger tournament where, I know I can take one trip and see a lot of players. That certainly helps. Obviously, there's budget constraints and also just time constraints. The other thing, if it just doesn't work, you don't overlap with somebody, is a video is a great, can be a great resource. I know, and I think some coaches will agree with me, like skip the highlight reel, skip the music and the crazy graphics. Just for me, if you shot a 10-minute video of you playing singles, like that'll tell me more than any highlight reel where it's just winner forehand, winner back. It's just not realistic. Like I want to see somebody, what do you look like when you lose a point? What do you look like when you win a point? How do you behave towards your opponent during a match? So and yes, like people will send those skill videos, which can be helpful as well to see somebody. But I would definitely spend time and prepare a video that just shows, I mean, for me, I prefer just singles, unedited match play. But yeah, you can skip a lot of the bells and whistles because it just doesn't show a college coach much.
Right. And you need to see where that ball goes. I remember getting videos where like, I didn't know that ball could have been hitting the fence for
right. And developing a point, right. You just
right.
tell when it's, these two shot and, I have no idea, like, well, how did you get that short ball? Like, I want to know what the rest of the point looked like. So, I mean, I'm all for just you should give me that match play and let me see the whole court and your opponent. And that's really helpful.
Yeah, no, for sure. Especially, I mean, when you're recruiting kids from all over the country, sometimes all over the world, like getting to watch them in person can be really difficult. Maybe they're not playing the tournaments you're going to, but it at least can get in front of you. And now a lot of facilities have, PlaySite and other streaming services, which can also be really great. So, okay, so that's good. So a lot of times people will ask me like, I don't know, how much is too much to communicate with a coach. So maybe they send you the first email, depending on the time of year, you could be in season like right now, and it might kind of slip to the bottom of your list. So should they follow up? Should they like be proactive? How much is too much communication? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely be aware of the time that you're contacting a coach. I mean, certainly for, us D3 coaches, we just got in season for the NESCAC was February 8th. And we're sort of going strong till May. So now it's busy. I'm really focused on my team and the practices. And so yes, like now, that's for a time where an email could slip through the cracks. If it's the off season, coaches probably got more time. I'm spending more time on emails and recruiting. So yeah, I would definitely say give it a couple weeks. I think following up is totally fine. I would say, every week saying, hey, did you get my emails? Probably not helpful, but I would definitely say after a couple of weeks, like, again, just short and sweet, like, hey, just, checking in, want to make sure you saw my email. I'm really interested. Or, and I think, at least I try to respond to every email I get, regardless if the player is in range or not. All coaches are different there, but I definitely following up. But just also, being aware of sort of, wow, I emailed them and smack in the middle of the season. It may take a little bit longer.
Right. No, that makes sense. So when you're at these tournaments or at a practice watching someone, what are the things you're looking for? Like what's your eye on? Obviously, results are almost maybe the easier thing to measure, like talent, but what are you taking notes on? What's important to you?
Yeah, I think, for every depending on your program and where you're at, you may be looking at different things. And for me, results are important for sure, but I want to see if the person is an athlete. I want to see how they move. Again, I want to see what type of person they are. Are they, screaming over line calls and screaming at their opponent and berating the ref? And, because that's, will get you off my list. I'll just, that's it. But I mean, just, how do they put a point together? Are they, just sort of what's their game style? Are they lefty? Are they righty? Like, just sort of taking a look at their whole profile. But, certainly, you also might get coaches that, like they're going by results and that's going to help determine, them set their recruiting class. But I definitely, for me, it's a big, like, how are you behaving on court? Your effort level. And I know, like, I've heard a lot of, sort of different showcases, people say this, but like, how do you treat your parents? Like when you get
Yeah.
off the court, like, are you throwing your bag at them? Are you, are they carrying
Yeah.
your stuff? Like, just for me to be at a tournament and be able to see the entire, package is really helpful. And just sort of know, like, when you've got those tournaments, like the coaches are always watching, like,
Yeah.
especially some of these bigger tournaments, like you can't go 2 feet without there being just some other coach in a division. And so just, yeah, to just be
Yeah.
aware coaches are looking for a lot of different things.
Yeah, it's a small world too. I feel like you're always building that reputation, even when you're not on the court. I
Yeah.
think high school students may not realize that, but it's so true.
A lot of us
You meant,
are
yeah,
friends. A lot of us are,
exactly.
competitive on the court, but we're friendly off it. And oh yeah, I mean, you share information, or
Yeah, yeah,
it's definitely a small world.
yeah, for sure. So you mentioned parents.
Mhm.
What do you think? I think lots of coaches take different approaches on this one, but what do you see the role of the parents being in this recruiting process?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think it should be the player, the recruit sort of initiating.
Hmm.
At my prior position, I remember I opened up a couple emails and it was the parent emailing me, and
Hmm.
I just, for me, that's like, your daughter's 18, 19, 17, 18 years old. Like, if they're really interested in the school, like they should be doing the work. They should be doing the
Yeah.
emails. I think it's important to include the parents, obviously if they come up for a visit or their parents are with them, or, I always like to sit in the office with mom, dad, the
Hmm.
recruit. But I think in terms of like the legwork and, sending the videos and stuff like that, for me, I want it coming from the girl. But
Yeah.
certainly the parents, need to be involved. They're also, probably going to be paying the tuition and
Hmm.
stuff like that. So, you want them to also feel comfortable that, you know, of where they're sending their daughter. So there definitely should be involved, but yeah, I think the legwork needs to come from the recruit.
Yeah. Yeah. So in Division 3, the recruiting rules are different, obviously, for each division a little bit. In Division 3, you can have contact with a recruit as early as you want, right? I mean, it could
Yeah, I
be,
mean, it's definitely way more relaxed than the other divisions. There's no dead period, right? You can
right.
um have contacts. There are, different rules regarding, I cannot meet at somebody's house.
Hmm.
Like Division 1 could do a home visit. So
Right.
there are definitely rules around that. But yeah, I mean, for me, and I maybe most coaches would agree, if you're a freshman, sophomore, like that's a little early. I'm definitely
Hmm.
still focused on, sort of the juniors. And so, you can definitely reach out and just say, hey, and I'm interested, and, just to create that contact. But I definitely would say anything younger than sort of your juniors, I'm
Yeah.
not spending that much time on right now, other than sort of making notes on maybe who I've heard
Hmm.
from.
Hmm.
But yeah, that is the nice thing about Division 3. It's
Yeah.
definitely just a whole different process than the other divisions. So um, if you are younger and you've made your list, sure, you can certainly reach out.
Yeah. Right. You'll take note, but probably not too much
Why
more
not
than that. Yeah.
anything? Yeah, maybe if it's in the off season and I'm not have a lot going on, or I'm not recruiting,
Yeah.
yeah, maybe, reach out a little bit more. But yeah, I mean, I'd
Mhm.
say it's really when they get to be juniors, you're
Right.
focused on who you're really looking at.
Right. And plus, I feel like academics are so big for you there that you need probably more information than a freshman or sophomore even has at that point academically.
That's where, I mean, it can be good to reach out when you're younger to say, hey, like, what are the requirements? Do I,
Yep.
are you SAT optional? Do I need scores? What kind of classes are you looking for? Like, so that can definitely be helpful for the student if you're aiming for one of these, institutions where, the academics are, extremely competitive,
Yep.
to get some information sort of before it's too late. I mean, that definitely helps. But yeah, I
Right.
mean, yeah, it just helps when they're a little bit older.
Right. Or if maybe you're at a tournament and they've emailed you, you might stop by and check them
Sure,
out. But
absolutely.
yeah. So yeah, that makes sense. So if you've gotten to the point where you've communicated, started building a relationship, watched someone play, hopefully by then, would the next step then be for you maybe to have them come visit campus and spend time with your team? Or and do you do unofficial visits, official visits, both? How does that work for you?
Yeah, so that definitely would be the next step. Again, so not only, Division III has its rules, but the NESCAC conference has their own rules. So we cannot host an official visit until September of somebody's senior year.
Mm-hmm.
I think, I couldn't quote me on this, but I think the rule for, NCAA Division III
Mm-hmm.
is you can do a visit. I think it's like after January of your junior year, but
Mm-hmm.
NESCAC, it's got to be senior. So again, that makes it a little bit can change someone's timeline if they are like, well, I don't want to commit until I come up and spend the night and
Mm-hmm.
see the team. So that can push the process a little bit longer, but you can, of course, have them up on official visits,
Yeah.
send them to a class, meet the team, see a practice, stuff like that. So that would definitely be the next step.
Mm-hmm.
I love it when they want to come see a practice. Matches are great. I just find that they're a little hectic,
Yeah.
especially if you've got, I want my own girls focused on obviously the match they're about to play, and people are
Mm-hmm.
sort of coming and going. Can be a little harder to, connect with a recruit. So I like practices because, they can sort of see how the team
Yeah.
works and functions and how I, run a practice as a coach. And it's a little more informal to be able to talk to somebody.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I would definitely say that's got to be, on some, you've got to take your visit. You got to see if the school is a fit, if the people are sort of your people, or you could see
Mm-hmm.
yourself at the school. Sometimes you may think something about a school and then you get there and it's maybe different than what you thought.
Yeah.
Obviously being around the team is important. Like you're talking about girls that potentially are going to be your future teammates,
Yeah.
people you're going to spend a lot of time with. So I definitely, once you've sort of made that connection and talked to the coach and there's sort of that mutual interest,
Mm-hmm.
definitely make a plan to get up there and visit the school for sure.
Yeah. How much do you involve your current players in the process? Like, do you ask for their feedback?
A lot.
Yeah.
Yep. And their feedback's important. And I include them all, even, my senior who's outgoing,
Mm-hmm.
you're part of the program, you're representative of this program. So, they all have a responsibility to be, available and participate when we have recruits on campus for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
And their feedback is important because, it's like, hey man, if there's any red flags, like I need to know.
Right.
But they're usually pretty honest. And to be honest, I feel like they always like the people that come to campus.
Hopefully by then, right? In the process.
So, and again, like I try to find girls that I think are going to be a good fit as well.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the teams are very, very involved when
Yeah.
we have somebody come to town.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, social media, do you recommend recruits have it for recruiting purposes, like some form of it, or do you follow recruits on social
Yeah,
media? What do you
so
think
the
about that?
social media is sort of an interesting one because I feel like it's just an ever evolving thing. There's always some new app, some new social media. I'm just sort of curious how the NCAA just continues to keep up with this stuff. But yeah, I mean, I like to see it two ways. Like our social media for Colby women's tennis, we're very active on. I find it's a good way to showcase the girls, the tennis, the practice, sort of the personal side of our team. So I do sort of take notice if a recruit's telling me how interested and they love Colby, but they're not following our social media. I'm like, okay,
Mhm.
well, again, maybe they're not big social media users themselves, but
Mhm.
I know like we are just a team that's very active on the social media. I think, and I definitely have searched for girls on,
Mhm.
because I think that matters. You sort of want to see, sometimes their profiles are private and you can't see them, that's fine. But you sort of want to see what they're putting out there and what
Mhm.
sort of image they're portraying. I mean, I've never really come across anything that was like, oh man, this is like
Yeah.
not good. I think kids now are pretty well versed in, what you put out there is out there.
Yeah.
Um, but it's something we use a lot. So I do appreciate it when I see a new follow come in and it's a recruit or somebody
Mhm.
who's told me they're interested in it. It just shows me they're doing more research and they're,
Right.
clearly looking at the program and not just saying they are. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, there's just so many, so many apps and so
I
many
know.
different things out there. But yeah, I would say just for recruits in general, like, again, be careful what you put out there because
Mhm.
coaches are looking and some maybe more than others. Some maybe look less, but, and again, that's, one of those things you put something out there and I see it and I tell another coach, like, who knows?
Yeah.
Like So definitely be
Yeah.
aware of your own social media presence.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. And I do think you're right that so many teams now are using social media not only to learn more about the recruits, but also for the recruits to learn about them. It kind of gives you this like really cool behind the scenes look sometimes at the players, the program, the coaches. Like it's valuable. I don't
Yeah,
know.
well, that's why I try to make mine. I'm probably like overly active, but I just feel like it's a really good way for me to just put something out there
Mhm.
on a daily, weekly basis and know that it's going to have a lot of eyes on it. And yeah, maybe show a side of the team that you didn't know about or something funny. Or I did some meet the team videos and
Yeah.
we have a senior doing a takeover and, just sort of fun stuff
Mhm.
that hopefully provides a bigger snapshot of who we are. I mean, I sort
Yeah.
of think about it like a business almost. Like if you're into something and you want to know more and you go to their social media page and they haven't posted since 2022, it's like
Yeah.
stop looking. Like, all right, they're
Right.
not active on there. But if you go to Colby W tennis I mean,
Yeah.
it's we're posting all the time. So
Yeah.
it's just up to date. And I know the parents appreciate it. I mean, they like
Yeah.
getting the match updates and, seeing their daughter at practice and doing
Mhm.
whatever else. So I just find it's a really good tool that
Yeah.
I've been able to use for a lot of different reasons.
Yeah, no, that's great. And so Division III NESCAC, you obviously don't have athletic scholarships.
Right.
It's need-based financial aid, like every other student that applies.
Yep.
So at what point for someone that's looking at a Division III or just a non-athletic scholarship school, for you, what would be your advice on like when should you start talking about money? Because that's obviously a huge factor for a lot of people.
Yeah. And I think it's probably differs, through, but yeah, I mean, it's definitely has to be discussed because while the financial aid is good, international financial aid is different. So depending on how you're recruiting, it's definitely, and it's also something that as coaches I have nothing to do with it.
Right.
I'm not involved. I can't go and say, hey, I really like this
Yeah.
player. Like it is hands off. So other than, hey, I can support you in admissions. That's about it. Like you really have to
Mhm.
be able to, get in on your own. And the financial aid is just a separate piece. So
Right.
and that's also going back to our initial, about the emails and doing your homework. I can't tell you how many emails I get saying, oh, I'm looking for a full
Mhm.
scholarship. I'm like,
Delete.
you didn't even,
Right.
look at what even division or what our rules are. So yeah, and I mean, fortunately that sort of also can be like the tough part of it if it just doesn't
Yeah.
work for somebody's family.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that definitely down the road sort of comes into play. And I always just give the financial aid, here's their information, they
Yeah.
can answer any questions. They have I think every school's website has one of those tuition calculators, and
Right.
it's just a ballpark, but I think schools do try to provide resources, so it's not a
Mhm.
surprise.
Right. And
Yeah,
yeah, I think you're absolutely right with the pre-read, the calculator, the financial aid calculator. Is that something you would say like as a first step? Like if someone's just sort of
yes.
showing
I
some interest.
usually send
Yeah.
them like our financial aid, page, and it's got all the information and tell them, hey, reach out to the office. They may be able to answer some more specific questions. Yeah, have your parents use the calculator, see if it's going to be, a fit for your
Yeah.
family.
Right. And are you at any point further down the road, once you start to narrow your list down, are you able to do any kind of financial aid pre-reads for recruits, or is that just like,
No, I mean,
yeah,
other than so sort of in the pre-read process, if I've reached a point where I'm interested in someone, they're interested,
yeah,
that's purely academic and
okay,
give the information to admissions, they'll come back to me and say, in range, not in range, et cetera, but it's nothing with financial aid. So,
yeah, right.
which is
I think
tough.
a lot of people misunderstand that and they think, well,
Yes.
you can just go do something like pull some strings and I need some money. It's like,
Yeah.
doesn't work that
And
way.
even admissions, like
Yeah,
I can lend my support, but admissions has the final say. It's not Division I, you're not signing anything, there's no, money. This is
yeah,
purely, it's academic and being able to get in on your
right.
own.
And are there NESCAC rules on the timing of those admissions pre-reads that you,
Yep.
yeah.
So we can submit them in June. They can, get them ready, but July 1st is when we will receive the information back. So after July 1st, is when you can sort of take those next steps with recruits,
Yeah.
knowing, so I always sort of tell the recruits, like, that's sort of the next,
Yeah.
if we can sort of proceed or not. But yeah, it's July 1st, is a big date. So it was a lot of, I think, beginning of July, you see a lot of like just chaos around hitting and offers and all this stuff. So,
Right.
and that's actually, as a recruit, to, don't get caught up in that. It may be right for somebody and they know exactly where they want to go on July 2nd and they're done. Other people, it could be April, it could be regular decision. So it happens, everything in between. I think it can be hard for coaches too. You feel like,
Yeah.
committing and what's happening. And, but everyone's going to go at their own pace, and there's a right spot for everybody.
Yeah. Oh, that's good advice. And so when you say July 1st, you're talking about between junior and senior year.
Yes.
Yeah. Right.
And again, it's sort of like the NESCAC, like, hey, give me a verbal, yep, I'm gonna, I think the wording you see a lot in the social medias. I've committed to the application process, blank at whatever school, which is basically you're saying, I'm going to apply ED1, but, we cannot say
right.
so it's, you see sort of some, maybe at times awkward wording, but that's why.
Right.
So
because it's up to the admissions office.
I hear from parents, it's so nerve-wracking. I'm like, I get it.
I know.
3, so.
Right.
Yeah. Until you get.
Assuming you got positive feedback in the pre-read process, it's probably pretty unlikely that anything.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, like, it's like always try to be so careful. And again, I don't know how other schools and, other coaches who have been at their institutions for, 10, 15 years can probably speak a little bit better to, hey, this is, in all my years, I've, never had anyone not get in, or whatever language they use. Obviously being new at my location, I'm just, hey, I'm supporting you in the process, but admissions has the final say.
Right.
I mean, admissions understands. I mean, I'm sure coaches, I'm trying to develop a good relationship with my liaison, and I'm sure all coaches have their relationships, and they understand. And so I feel like it's, it's my obligation as well to put forth students that, are in range for what, Colby's academics are. I think that makes everyone's job easier, but I think generally like we all try to work together.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. So let's say you have supported this person through the admissions process. They want to come to Colby, they get their acceptance letter. Now they've got a chunk of time between then and when they actually show up on campus. You can't require certain things of them, but like, what's your advice to recruits? Like, once they've made that decision, they know where they're going, how to use that time between then and when they arrive on campus to really set themselves up for a good first semester.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously if we're talking someone has gone ED1 and they've got that letter in hand and it's November and they've, which I always say to recruits, you have to keep your grades up. Like you may have that letter, but it's contingent on, you continuing to do what you've done up until this point. Obviously it's not generally a problem, but I always make sure I say it. The grades are still important. This isn't just, hey, I got in, I'm taking the, rest of the year off. But in terms of tennis wise, hopefully when you have that, where you're going and that's set, hopefully you can have, fun, go play some tournaments and work on something, like pick something of your game that you really want to improve before you get to college. And, but I mean, I like to see people continue to play, not just, hey, I got in and my work is done. Like you got to keep playing. Like I want people to come in and, be ready to compete for a spot in the lineup and just keep themselves going. So, but yeah, I mean, obviously take a break if you're sort of like a little bit burnt out, but yeah, I just keep working hard in the classroom and in, on the court for sure. And hopefully you have a little less pressure doing so, knowing where you're going.
Yeah. Huge relief.
Yes.
So if we were going to fast forward just for a minute to actually being at Colby, playing in the NESCAC, being a student athlete there, can you, for maybe a high school tennis player that's listening to this, wondering what's it like? What's the schedule like? What's the life of a Colby women's tennis player? What are the demands? Like, can I do this?
Yeah, I think that's probably the biggest question I get, is tell me what's the practice like? What's the training like? Do the girls handle the classroom? And for the most part, yes, because again, the academics in the, admissions process is so important.
Right.
These girls are qualified to be at the school. And, yeah, I'm not saying there's not stressful times. You got finals due, you got, midterms, a big paper. There's definitely times throughout the year where I know that they're a little bit more stressed. But I think tennis players are pretty routine oriented. I feel like they keep each other motivated. A lot of them are in class together. They'll finish practice. They'll go to the library. They, go to dinner together. So I do feel like there's, you have a support built in. I think this is probably true of myself and all coaches. I have a tab on their academics. So I know if they're struggling in something or if they need additional support. So there's really not a situation where something would just fall through the cracks and go unnoticed. So I do feel like there's just a lot of eyes on them as some athletes, and it's good, and it just keeps them focused. And but yeah, it definitely takes some time management. Different coaches run different length practices. Mine are about 2 hours, and although I did miss the fall, but there was 3 competitions in the fall, and then we've got our matches and our spring break coming up. So just keeping yourself on schedule, but knowing you do have a support around you that if you do need help, like many people are here to support you.
Right. Oh, that's huge. And I think, you're a special coach. I feel like that really thinks about that, because not all coaches, sometimes it's a little bit more focused on just the tennis, but that's great to hear that, you want them to succeed everywhere.
Well, probably, again, I'm not going to speak for my NESCAC coaches, but I feel like we're similar in there. I mean, we know our girls are very, academic minded, and that's why they probably picked an NESCAC, because they want a high level tennis, but D3 offers you time to explore other interests, join clubs, write for the paper, stuff that maybe on a D1 schedule, you might not just have time for. So I think we all understand that they're student athletes, and I want them to have that full range experience. Again, that's why they picked Division 3. If they wanted a Division 1 experience, they would have, picked a different school. So I think that's really important. At least knowing that why they're, in this conference at, at my school.
Right. No, exactly. So if you had to give a recruit kind of your biggest piece of advice in all of this, having gone through this process yourself, played college tennis, now you've been a coach for many years, a head coach now, what perspective would you want to give them?
I would say, number one, be yourself. You're trying to find a college that fits you. Obviously, the college is trying to find, what fits them. So be genuine, be your authentic self. The fit, I think, is just focus on the fit, focus on, hey, if the coach left, would you be happy there? If you were injured, would you be happy there? It's so much more than just, that the tennis. Like, does the school have the major that you're really interested in? So definitely focus on, the fit, and do you feel like this is really where you see yourself? Because I know, like, I get bummed when you lose a recruit, but hey, if it's not for them, like, it's not for them. And I'd rather them make that choice and be upfront with me, and that's fine. Even if I'm bummed to hear it. And then just, again, like we talked about, do your homework, start early, make your lists, be diligent. Again, I've gotten emails that have called me the wrong coach's name. They've called me the wrong school. Like I said, looking for scholarships, like, take your time. Yeah, I understand. Like, if I got an email, so did probably 15 other coaches. That's part of the process. Like, just as like a recruit is looking at, 15 schools, like, I'm also recruiting, a lot of girls for that class. So, do your homework, be diligent. And I think it'll work out. Again, don't panic. There's a place for everybody. There's a program for everybody. Don't close any door, maybe a school you haven't heard of, or you're not sure about, or the location geographically, but take a look, because you just never know. That'd be my advice.
No, that's such good advice. I feel like it really does boil down to the people a lot of times. And you know how much time you spend with your teammates and coaches. So those relationships are so critical. And when you find the right people, that's an awesome experience.
I guess,
So,
another sort of piece of advice is to, just don't be afraid to ask the coach questions. Hey, how big's your roster? Do freshmen play? What would I have to do to earn a spot? Like, ask all of these things, because you
yeah,
want to know before you get there and find out maybe this isn't exactly what you thought.
yeah.
So just don't be afraid to ask questions. And I always like when recruits ask me something that's maybe a little out of the box. So you get the standard, what's your schedule like, and
Uh-huh.
all that stuff. But like, don't be afraid to just ask questions. So anything you
Mhm.
want to know, like, I want to present a picture of what our program is on a whole, and the more questions I get asked, I can talk more about the program. So
Yeah,
don't be afraid to ask questions.
yeah. No, that's great. Well, I am so excited for you. Big things coming for Colby women's tennis.
Let's hope. Let's hope. Get it going.
No hoping. I'm
Yeah.
sure of it. So, thank you so much for all your great advice and tips. And make sure I'll have all of your social media website links
Yeah, that'd
in
be
the
great. And
video.
come see us when we're in Connecticut. We're down in Connecticut a couple times. So
I
if
definitely will for sure. So, thank you so much,
awesome.
Erin.
All right. Thank you so much. Bye.